Is the next UK government about to break one of its biggest promises and raise your income tax? The UK is facing a fiscal black hole estimated to be as large as £35 billion. Public services are crying out for funding, but the money simply isn't there. For months, the Labour Party has promised not to raise the big three taxes: income tax, national insurance and VAT. But the economic reality is beginning to bite. In this video, we're going to break down exactly why Labour's Shadow Chancellor, Reeves, finds herself in an impossible position, and why a broad-based income tax rise is now looking not just possible, probable. Before we dive into the numbers and the politics, if you appreciate in-depth analysis that cuts through the noise, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that notification bell. It helps us continue to produce this content. And a quick disclaimer: this analysis is based on the latest available data, public statements, and expert economic commentary. The situation is fluid, and the final budget on November the 26th may contain surprises. This is our best assessment of the likely path forward. Let's begin. First, let's understand the sheer scale of the problem. Why do we even have a black hole in the public finances? This isn't just a small gap. Experts estimate the shortfall to be between £30 and £40 billion. Our working estimate, based on the consensus, is around £35 billion. This colossal figure comes from three main sources. First, the UK's Office for Budget Responsibility (OBR) is expected to downgrade its productivity growth forecast by 0.3 percentage points, which translates to a financial shortfall of over £20 billion due to decreased tax revenue. This decline forces the Chancellor to consider tax increases or spending cuts to balance the budget. Second, planned welfare cuts of £5 billion have been abandoned due to political challenges, while there is pressure to remove the two-child benefit cap, potentially costing another £3.5 to £4 billion. Third, to calm financial markets and bring down the UK's borrowing costs, the Chancellor needs to build confidence. This means creating more headroom or a safety cushion in her fiscal plans. Experts believe she'll want to build in an extra cushion of at least £5 billion. When you add it all up, the growth downgrade, the new spending, the abandoned cuts, and the need for a market calming cushion, you quickly arrive at that staggering figure of around £35 billion. So, the hole is real, and it's massive. The next question is, how do you fill it? This is where the politics gets incredibly tricky. At a recent Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister made a crucial statement: there will be no return to austerity. This is a clear signal that the government does not believe it can, or should, find this £35 billion through massive cuts to public services, which are already stretched to their breaking point. So, if spending cuts are off the table, the money has to come from tax rises. But which ones? Let's rule out the other major options. Why not raise VAT? Increasing VAT, the tax on goods and services, would be the fastest way to increase inflation. It feeds directly into prices in the shops. Higher inflation would mean the Bank of England keeps interest rates higher for longer, which in turn increases the government's own debt interest payments, a bill that is already costing over £100 billion a year. It would be economically self-defeating. Okay, what about a collection of smaller, targeted wealth taxes? Things like raising capital gains tax or introducing a new mansion tax on expensive properties. The government seems to be backing away from this plethora of fiddly taxes approach for two reasons. First, it's bad for growth. Hitting lots of different parts of the economy with new taxes creates uncertainty and can deter investment. Second, it's terrible politics. As we've seen before, even a small tax change can alienate a very vocal and influential group of voters, creating a massive political headache for very little financial gain. A mansion tax, for example, would require a nationwide property revaluation, a hugely complex and unpopular process that would take years. So, if you can't make deep spending cuts, you can't raise VAT, and a patchwork of smaller taxes is too complex and politically toxic, you are left with one very large and very difficult option. This brings us to the elephant in the room: income tax. This is where a recent exchange in Parliament becomes so significant. The leader of the opposition asked the Prime Minister to stand by his manifesto promise not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT. In July, when asked the exact same question, the PM gave a one-word answer: yes. This time, he completely ignored the question. That evasion is being interpreted across Westminster as a clear sign that the promise is about to be broken. Raising income tax is the simplest, albeit most painful way to raise a truly significant sum of money. Let's look at the numbers. Putting just 1 penny on the basic rate of income tax would raise £8.2 billion. A penny on all rates basic, higher and top would raise around £10 billion. This would be a meaningful contribution, but it wouldn't fill the hole. This leads to the most likely and most dramatic scenario: a 2p rise on all rates of income tax. This single move would raise over £20 billion, plugging the majority of that £35 billion black hole in one go. Politically, this is a nightmare. It hits ordinary working people. But from a purely economic and administrative point of view, it's the cleanest way to raise the colossal sums required. The logic is that the shock is absorbed by the broadest possible number of people. And while it hits everyone, it is still progressive. Those on the highest incomes pay the most in cash terms. If Rachel Reeves does this, the political fallout will be enormous. This is what one commentator called the worst of all politics. Why? Because the Labour Party would make themselves unpopular for putting up taxes, and doubly unpopular because voters will say, "And you lied to us about it." Breaking a core manifesto promise is one of the most damaging things a new government can do. To put this in historical context, the last time a UK government increased the basic rate of income tax was in 1975 under Harold Wilson. For nearly 50 years, the trend, under both Conservative and Labour governments, has been to cut it. For Rachel Reeves to be the first Chancellor in half a century to reverse that trend would be a monumental and politically perilous decision. She would be gambling that voters will eventually understand it was a necessary evil. So, how could she possibly sell this? This is why we've seen a subtle but significant shift in Labour's language. Rachel Reeves has recently started talking more explicitly about the economic damage caused by Brexit. The potential strategy here is to build a new narrative, to say to the Pentry, "Look, we are poorer as a nation because of the trade barriers erected by Brexit. This has damaged our growth and created this budget crisis. This tax rise is a bitter pill we must swallow to stabilise the finances. But our long-term plan is to fix our economy by forging a much closer trading relationship with Europe." End quote. By framing the tax rise as a direct consequence of Brexit and linking it to a future vision of economic recovery through closer EU ties, Labour might hope to galvanise support from a large part of the electorate and provide a justification for breaking their promise. So, to summarise, the UK has a fiscal black hole of around £35 billion. Austerity is off the table, and other major tax options are either economically dangerous or politically unworkable. This has boxed the likely next Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, into a corner. The evidence is pointing towards the one move big enough to solve the problem: a broad-based increase in income tax, most likely 2p on all rates. It would be a historically significant, politically explosive decision that breaks a core promise. But faced with an impossible set of choices, it appears to be the path they are now preparing to take. All eyes will be on the budget on November the 26th. What do you think? Is this a necessary evil or a political betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more analysis on the stories that matter.